At 3:47 a.m. on October 8, 1944, Private First Class Aurelio, age 23, lay pressed against wet Kogon grass 40 meters from the eastern fence line of a Japanese Imperial Army motor pool at Cabanatuan, WWII, where 34 enemy vehicles, including 6 cargo trucks, 4 staff cars, 22 transport lorries, and 2 Type 94 half-tracks, sat fully fueled and staged for a pre-dawn push north. The night air so thick with fog that it condensed invisible droplets along the barrel of his rusted Enfield. His canvas satchel held 7 repurposed castor oil tins filled not with motor lubricant, but with a hand-ground suspension of volcanic scoria from the eroded slopes of Mount Arayat, blended into refined coconut oil, dark, dense, and so convincingly indistinguishable from genuine crankcase oil that it had already passed undetected beside authentic Japanese motor pool stores during 2 prior reconnaissance visits. His fire support element, 4 men under Sergeant Efren Bautista, held position 120 meters to his northeast, behind a collapsed masonry irrigation wall. Aurelio had exactly 18 minutes before the 4 Heaven Card rotation crossed his line of movement. Wars are rarely won by men with the most credentials. They are won by men who notice what everyone else has already stopped looking at. The events of that night would spend decades in the fragmentary margins of Philippine resistance documentation, a typewritten debriefing transcript in the Philippine National Archives, a single commendation form filed through USAFFE channels, and the competing oral accounts of men who disagreed on minor details but never on the outcome. On the morning of October 15, 1944, a Japanese convoy of 34 vehicles departed Cabanatuan for reinforcement positions in northern Luzon. 29 engines seized within the first 15 kilometers. Lieutenant Colonel Hiroshi Tanaka, the convoy commander, filed an incident report attributing the catastrophic failures to contaminated depot fuel. He was wrong. What destroyed that convoy had been prepared 10 days earlier by a man his own commanding officer had dismissed as a mechanic's assistant playing of being a soldier. His name was Aurelio Dimolanta. His weapon was volcanic ash, coconut oil, and patience. No one believed it would work. Then it did. Before we dive in, I want to know, where are you listening to this story from? Drop your city or country in the comments right now, and let's see which corner of the world has the most war legend fans. Don't just scroll, type it out. Your comment might get featured in the next story. Aurelio was born in October 1921 in Gapan, WWII, the 4th of 7 children of a mestizo tenant farmer whose household supplemented its income through a small family-operated coconut oil press. His formal schooling ended at the 3rd year of intermediate school, and with his father's deteriorating health moved him into full farm labor. By December 1941, when Japanese aircraft first appeared over the Philippine sky, Dimolanta had spent 5 years maintaining the family's chronically unreliable Fordson tractor, a machine so temperamental that keeping it running had become an informal curriculum in applied mechanics. He understood friction intuitively, the way men who work with their hands understand it. Not as a principle written in a textbook, but as a sensation that traveled through a wrench into the palm. He understood lubrication. He understood in a physical and direct way that no classroom had taught him what happened inside an engine when something was wrong. He enlisted with the reconstituted guerrilla resistance network in central Luzon in late 1942, joining one of the informal cells that had coalesced from USAFFE remnants and civilian volunteers following the fall of Bataan. Assignment came quickly and predictably. Given his mechanical background, he was placed in a logistics and maintenance role. He repaired captured vehicles, maintained the cell's 2 functional jeeps, sourced replacement gaskets and hose clamps from demolished Japanese supply trucks, and occasionally served as a runner between sector commanders. His commanding officer, Captain Rodrigo Macarreg, was a former Philippine Army infantry lieutenant, formally trained, direct in temperament, and operationally experienced in the hit-and-run tactics that Central Luzon's road network demanded. Macarreg was not dismissive of Dimolanta as a person. He was simply blind to him as an asset beyond his designated function. In the informal status economy of the resistance cell, men who conducted ambushes accumulated standing. Men who serviced carburetors did not. Dimolanta did not protest this arrangement. He was not, by any survivor account, a man who argued his own importance. He was quiet, thorough, and observant, qualities that made him well-suited for maintenance work and, as it turned out, for something else entirely. Beginning in mid-1943, Dimolanta's maintenance role brought him into the peripheral orbit of the Japanese motor pool at Cabanatuan. Not inside it. Proximity was achieved through covered observation runs to the tree lines and irrigation channels adjacent to the facility's eastern perimeter. What he saw over the course of months was unremarkable to most observers. Japanese mechanics servicing vehicles, conducting oil changes on scheduled intervals, fueling and checking tire pressure in the systematic, process-driven way that the Japanese Imperial Army's logistics culture demanded. But Dimolanta was watching something specific. He noticed that Japanese motor pool NCOs were precise about their maintenance schedules and casual about supervision during routine top-off operations. Filipino laborers with legitimate access to the supply perimeter were sometimes directed to carry and pour lubricants from storage drums to vehicle crankcases, supervised loosely, watched briefly, then left to complete the task without close scrutiny. He noticed that the lubricant storage area near the pool's eastern fence was not under active guard during a pre-dawn window between 2 and 4 a.m. The question that assembled itself over weeks of observation was not dramatic. It was mechanical. What substance could be introduced into an engine that would behave like oil long enough to pass undetected, but would destroy bearing and cylinder surfaces once the engine reached operating temperature under load? What was available locally, free, abundant, and easily processed, that was fine enough, hard enough, and suspendable in a lubricant medium to accomplish this? Mount Arayat's volcanic flanks provided the answer. The fine scoria eroding from its lower slopes could be ground to near powder consistency with a stone mill. Mixed into coconut oil at the right ratio, the resulting suspension was dark, heavy, and visually convincing. It would pour through a fill port. It would circulate through oil galleries. And under the heat and pressure of a running engine operating at road speed, it would score cylinder walls and bearing surfaces with the patience of sandpaper, gradually, invisibly, until the damage was irreversible. He brought the idea to Captain Macarag in the spring of 1944. Macarag listened for 4 minutes and declined. The military situation in central Luzon in the autumn of 1944 was understood in broad terms by every guerrilla cell with functioning radio contact to WPA headquarters. MacArthur's return, which would materialize in the Leyte landings of October 20th, was anticipated. What this meant operationally for resistance cells in Luzon was a Japanese response of increasing tempo, convoys running more frequently, garrison forces repositioning, the road network carrying heavier and more sustained traffic than at any point since the occupation's early consolidation. The Japanese 14th Area Army was preparing for an American offensive it could not precisely locate but could not ignore, and its preparation ran through every provincial road in central Luzon. For the Japanese command structure, this road network was not merely useful, it was the architecture of their defense. Infantry could not reposition across Luzon at useful speed without vehicle transport. Artillery could not be emplaced or shifted without truck columns. Ammunition and supply dumps could not be replenished from coastal depots without convoy runs. The vehicle fleet that kept this network functional was, in the language Dimolanta would never have used, a critical vulnerability, a concentrated, semi-fixed asset upon which an enormous weight of operational capability depended. The motor pool at Cabanatuan was one node in this system, a principal staging and maintenance facility for the 14th Area Army's logistics chain in Nueva Ecija, responsible for a rotating fleet that serviced supply runs between Cabanatuan, San Jose, and the provincial road corridor running north toward Languien. It operated with the confidence of a secure installation, which it effectively was. Its perimeter guard force was modest but consistent. Its daytime motor pool NCO section was experienced and thorough. Its fundamental security assumption that no guerrilla force would attempt to corrupt the vehicle lubricant supply from inside the perimeter was not unreasonable. Guerrillas ambushed convoys, they demolished bridges, they cut communication lines, they assassinated collaborators. They did not, as a recognized practice, kneel beside 34 vehicles in the pre-dawn dark and poison their crankcases. This was the operational gap Dimolanta had identified, not as a strategist. As a mechanic who had spent a year watching Japanese motor pool routines and asking himself a series of increasingly specific questions, Macari-Excel had tested the alternative approaches through direct experience. 3 conventional anti-convoy operations in the preceding 8 months had produced results that were instructive and consistently sobering. The first, an ambush on the San Jose Road in February 1944, destroyed 1 truck and wounded several soldiers, but triggered a pacification sweep through 3 nearby barrios that cost the cell 2 informants and forced a full relocation of the base camp. The second, a nighttime bridge demolition south of Cabanatuan, delayed Japanese vehicle movement for 11 days, after which Japanese engineers repaired the bridge and convoy tempo increased to compensate for the disruption. The third attempt, an ambush preparation in June 1944, was aborted when Japanese motorcycle scouts moved ahead of the convoy's scheduled route, and McCoy ordered the team to stand down before contact. 3 operations. Minimal sustained effect, escalating resource cost. Growing risk to the civilian population the cell depended on for support. Now, in October 1944, with American landings imminent and Japanese vehicle traffic at its highest density since the occupation began, Macarrag faced a specific and time-critical problem. A confirmed 34-vehicle convoy, escorted, carrying infantry and ammunition north along the Lingayen route, was scheduled to depart on October 15th. USAFFE Regional Command had radioed two directives in September that defined his operational parameters. The first instructed Central Luzon resistance cells to intensify disruption of Japanese logistics in advance of the anticipated American offensive. The second, and more operationally constraining, noted that open engagements with escorted convoys risked triggering severe civilian reprisals and directed commanders to prioritize non-kinetic sabotage where feasible. Non-kinetic sabotage. Macarrag read the directive 3 times. Then he sent for Dimolanta. The meeting was direct. Macarrag did not apologize for the spring dismissal. He asked 2 questions. How many vehicles could Dimolanta treat in a single night insertion, and at what point would effects manifest? Dimolanta answered without hesitation, 30 or more vehicles, given adequate preparation time and favorable conditions inside the motor pool. Effects under sustained road operation. He estimated 20 to 30 kilometers, enough distance to ensure the convoy was fully committed before failures began and far from repair infrastructure. Macarrag authorized a field test on a captured Japanese truck the cell used for parts. The test engine seized in 40 minutes under load. Exactly as Dimolanta had predicted. Authorization for the operation did not change Dimolanta's standing inside the cell. That distinction, small but real, mattered during the 10 days of preparation that followed. When cooperation from other cell members became operationally necessary, the preparation requirements were specific. Dimolanta needed volcanic scoria in sufficient volume to treat 30 or more vehicles, ground to near powder consistency and prepared in suspension with coconut oil at the ratio he had validated in the engine test. He needed the mixture packed in containers visually identical to Japanese-issue motor oil tins, and he needed those tins introduced to the motor pool's vicinity to a credible cover mechanism. A pathway that would explain, if questioned, why Filipino handled oil containers were moving near the Japanese vehicle area. The grinding work fell entirely to Dimolanta. Cell members whose backgrounds were in ambush and direct action had no particular incentive to spend their evenings at a stone mill, reducing volcanic rock to powder. Sergeant Bautista, who had responded to the engine test with visible interest, volunteered 2 of his men for collection runs to the Arayat foothills, where the right grade of erosion-exposed scoria could be sourced in quantity. The collection runs were conducted over 3 nights, packaged as firewood gathering trips by the cell's cover families in the area. The scoria arrived at Dimolanta's preparation station in cloth sacks, coarse and irregular, requiring reduction before it could be suspended in oil without settling too rapidly. The container preparation was the second operational obstacle. Dimolanta had 6 authentic Castrol motor oil tins, recovered from a demolished Japanese supply truck earlier that year. He cleaned them, refilled them with the prepared suspension, and resealed them using crimping and sealing techniques adapted from his father's coconut oil trade. A 7th tin was fashioned from repurposed Japanese sardine tins soldered into a rough cylinder. Not elegant, but functional and visually plausible in poor light. The filled tins passed visual and olfactory inspection. Refined coconut oil at the correct mixture ratio carries minimal scent and presents a color sufficiently close to SAE 30 motor oil to defeat casual examination in low light conditions. They would not survive laboratory analysis or close scrutiny by a suspicious inspector in good light. They did not need to. The cell's intelligence asset, a Filipino laborer with authorized access to the motor pool's peripheral supply area, confirmed the operational timing window. Evening vehicle checks and fueling were conducted between 6:00 Parabital BMAR conducted between 6:00 and Seston 9 p.m. After 9 p.m., the vehicle area was secured under guard rotation. The next scheduled personnel activity was a pre-dawn preparation check at For's and Tuggin and Axon time. The window between Tuggin and 30:45 a.m. represented the longest available period without predictable motor pool personnel movement. The intelligence also confirmed the convoy composition, 34 vehicles, including infantry transport trucks carrying ammunition and supply loads, 4 staff cars in a dedicated section, and 2 Type 94 half-tracks assigned to convoy front and rear security. Departure scheduled 5:30 a.m. October 15. When Dimolanta presented the operational plan to the assembled cell, the institutional resistance emerged precisely where he had anticipated it would. Corporal Andres Villanueva, Macarrag. The plan required 1 operative to penetrate to within meters of 34 enemy vehicles and treat each crankcase fill port individually, working in near darkness by muscle memory alone, with a single guard rotation as the only reliable time reference. If Dimalamsa was discovered at any point, the cell's human intelligence asset would be compromised, the operation would fail, and Japanese security response in the area would be severe. One man. No fire support within effective range. 34 targets. 18 minutes. Makareg acknowledged the objection and overruled it with the same cold arithmetic that had driven his authorization. A conventional ambush on a 34-vehicle escorted convoy exceeded the cell's firepower. It would announce their position to the Cabanatuan garrison. It would trigger reprisals against the civilian network they depended on. Dimalanta's method failed quietly, if it failed at all. One man compromised was a contained loss. And if it succeeded, 34 vehicles disabled without a shot, without an identifiable guerrilla position, without a single reprisal trigger. Villanueva did not speak again at the briefing. But 2 days before the operation, he told Bautista that he believed they were sending a maintenance man to do a soldier's job. Bautista did not argue. He had watched the captured truck's engine lock at the interval Dimalanta had predicted. He told Villanueva to be in position behind the irrigation wall at 3:30 a.m. and to be ready to cover a fast extraction. The night of October 14 arrived with weather that central Luzon's interior produces in typhoon season's trailing month. Not a storm, but a persistent, low-lying fog that reduced visibility to 30 meters and transformed the motor pool's exterior security lighting into diffuse orange smears against the dark. Dimalanta's forward observer, returning to the staging position at 2 a.m., described the conditions in 2 words. Dimalanta closed his eyes briefly when he heard them, not in prayer, though Bautista later said it looked that way, and began his final equipment check in silence. 7/10. Enough mixture at his measured port rate, a controlled 3-second tilt per fill port to treat 32 to 35 individual crankcases. Each tin was base marked with a scratched numeral corresponding to its intended row of vehicles, a memory aid developed during the 61 rehearsals he had run in camp over the preceding week. The rehearsals had been conducted on the captured truck in improvised spacing stands arranged to approximate the motor pool's row geometry, walked until the physical sequence disengaged from deliberate thought. Kneel at port height, locate fill cap by touch, quarter turn counterclockwise, 3-second port diatrum quarter, place, 3-second port airs, replace, quarter turn clockwise, move, 3 to 4 seconds per vehicle in clean conditions, 4 minutes per row, including transit. Bautista's 4-man team moved to the irrigation wall at 3:30 a.m. Dimalanta moved out from the staging position alone at 3:33. The perimeter fence was single-strand wire, not electrified. A ground-level gap, created by erosion beneath the bottom strand, had been identified and mapped on his second reconnaissance visit. He passed through it on his stomach in 11 seconds, controlling his breathing, not rushing. The fog was exactly as described, dense enough to reduce the security post at the motor pool's northeast corner to a smear of light, directionless and fixed, which told him the sentry was stationary on circuit. He had cleared the wire at 3:34. The sentry's patrol circuit, mapped over 3 observation sessions, ran between 11 and 13 minutes. He had, theoretically, 5 to 7 minutes before the next pass crossed his line of movement. He held position inside the wire for 45 seconds, flat on the ground, listening. A cooling engine ticked in the vehicle rows ahead of him. Condensation dripped from the wire behind. The fog pressed everything beyond 20 meters into undifferentiated gray silence. He rose to a low crouch and moved. The first row contained 6 cargo trucks, hoods oriented south toward the main gate. Dimalanta navigated by shape rather than vision. The mass of the cab, the angle of the running board, the shadow of the hood louver, moving to the first vehicle's engine side in a controlled knee walk, his breath shallow and regular. He had learned the crankcase fill port location on a Japanese Type 97 truck during his reconnaissance, a recessed fitting on the upper engine casing, accessible through a gap in the driver's side hood louver. His fingers found it in 4 seconds. Quarter turn counterclockwise, 3-second port turn counterclockwise, 3-second pour. The tin's weight shifted against his palm as the mixture descended. Replace. Quarter turn clockwise. Move. By the third vehicle, he had found a rhythm. Not fast, but steady, the metered pace of a man who understood that speed produces sound, and sound produces exposure. By the fifth, his hands operated without direction from his conscious mind, executing the sequence while his attention moved outward to the sound surrounding him. Something shifted in the equipment storage area to his left. Animal movement, unhurried, departing. He stopped, held for 4 seconds. Moved again, the first tin emptied after 6 vehicles. He set it beside the truck's rear wheel, placed, not dropped, and reached for the second. The second row held 8 transport lorries, longer body, higher engine access, dual ports positioned further forward, and approach from the left side rather than the right. This was a variance he had mapped during reconnaissance and rehearsed specifically. He circled to the correct approach angle without breaking pace, completing the row in 3 minutes and 40 seconds. It was during the third lorry of the second row that he heard voices. They came from the direction of the sentry post, not a patrol but stationary conversation. 2 voices, Japanese, indistinct through the fog. Dimolanta was on his knees beside the third lorry's engine compartment, open tin in his right hand, fill cap removed and sitting in his left palm. The suspension 3 seconds from completing its pour. He held that position without movement for what his later debriefing described as approximately 1 minute, acknowledging the estimate might be imprecise. The voices did not move. They had the acoustic quality of 2 men standing and talking, not approaching, not departing. He estimated their position at 25 to 30 meters north. He finished the pour, replaced the cap. The voices continued. He moved to the fourth lorry. The third tin was exhausted after the second row. The fourth started on the third row, 6 heavy cargo trucks, the largest engine displacement in the pool, the vehicles that would carry the greatest supply loads north. These were the ones that mattered most. Larger oil galleries meant broader distribution of the scoria suspension through the lubrication system. Higher operating temperatures under load meant faster abrasion of bearing surfaces. Greater mechanical stress on the drivetrain meant faster progression from symptom to failure. If any vehicles in the convoy were going to fail first and most completely, it would be these. He was treating the fourth vehicle in the third row when he heard the footsteps. Not the stationary conversation. A single set of footsteps, regular and purposeful, moving. The guard rotation. He had been inside the perimeter for what felt like 12 minutes, and the guard cycle had compressed, not because of anything he had done, but because one sentry had, for whatever reason, shortened his circuit. The footsteps were moving west to east along the northern vehicle line, approximately 15 meters from Dimolanta's position. The fog provided visual cover in both directions, but also eliminated his ability to track the sentry's exact path. He went flat under the cargo truck, completely still, satchel pressed under his chest, open tin held level in his right hand, tilted to prevent spillage. His face against the wet gravel of the motor pool floor, the compound smell of diesel, oil, and damp earth filling his nostrils. The footsteps stopped. 5 seconds. 10. Dimolanta did not breathe. A flashlight beam, narrow, yellowish, the quality of a battery close to exhaustion, swept once beneath the vehicle row from the northern end. The beam traveled 6 truck lengths and stopped short. It did not reach the underside of the truck sheltering, Dimolanta. A pause of 3 seconds. The footsteps resumed, moving east, their sound flattening and then dissolving into the fog. 45 seconds of stillness. Then Dimolanta moved. He completed the third row. The fourth row held the staff car section, 4 vehicles, lower chassis, fill ports differently positioned, proximity to the officer billet slightly higher risk. He had allocated reduced mixture volume to the staff cars by design. Speed over thoroughness in this row, given the access angle and the exposure. 4 vehicles in under 3 minutes. The fifth row was mixed transport lorries, 6 vehicles. He was on his 5th tin, and for the first time in the operation, his hands were not entirely steady. Not fear, as he would note in his debriefing with an absence of dramatic framing, but the accumulated muscular tension of 45 minutes of sustained, precise movement in sustained stillness. He completed the row. Steady enough. The 6th and final row held the 2 Type 94 half-tracks and the remaining cargo trucks. The half-tracks were the operation's priority targets. Their engines drove track assemblies under continuous mechanical load, the most demanding operational condition possible for bearing surfaces already compromised by suspended abrasive. He had reserved the highest concentration of scoria suspension for these vehicles. The last 10.5 went into the half-tracks and the 4 remaining trucks. The final cap went back into place at 3056 a.m. He checked his wristwatch by feel, 2 minutes before the 4 a.m. rotation. He moved back toward the perimeter wire at the same controlled pace he had entered with, satchel now holding 7 spent tins instead of 7 full ones. Through the ground-level gap. Onto the grass outside the wire. Low crawl through the fog toward the irrigation wall. He reached Bautista's position at 4:02 a.m. Bautista looked at him without speaking for a moment. "All of them," he said quietly. 31 full treatments, Dimolanta answered. "The staff cars and the first-row trucks I ran lighter, both half-tracks are fully done." Bautista counted in his head. 31 engines. Yes. Bautista nodded once and raised his hand to signal the team's withdrawal. No congratulations. No speech. In central Luzon in 1944, a nod from Sergeant Bautista was the highest immediate currency available. They were 300 meters from the motor pool and move in when the 4 a.m. guard rotation crossed the eastern perimeter line behind them. The convoy departed at 5:42 a.m. on October 15, 12 minutes behind schedule. The delay caused by a routine pre-departure equipment check that produced no abnormal findings because there were no abnormal findings to produce. 31 engines registered normal oil pressure on their gauges. Their temperatures were cold. The scoria suspension circulated unremarkably through their oil galleries alongside lubricant that had been doing its job for weeks. It was only under the sustained heat and pressure of extended road operation, engines warming to operating temperature, oil pressure rising, the abrasive particles gaining kinetic force against bearing surfaces, that the destruction would begin. The first vehicle reported trouble at kilometer 11 north of Cabanatuan, rising temperature, erratic oil pressure. The driver pulled to the roadside shoulder. Japanese mechanics traveling with the convoy assessed and attributed the symptom to a possible oil cooler issue. The convoy continued. By kilometer 15, 4 more vehicles had shouldered with similar symptoms. The convoy NCO ordered a halt to assess. During the haul, 2 engines seized completely, catastrophic bearing failure, producing the metallic knock of a locking crankshaft before the engine went silent. By 9 a.m., 29 vehicles were stranded along a 12-kilometer stretch of national road. The last 2 functioning vehicles, the rearmost cargo truck and 1 staff car, both treated with reduced mixture due to Dimelantis timing adjustments on the final rows, returned to Cabanatuan under their own power. Lieutenant Colonel Tanaka's incident report, filed that afternoon, attributed the catastrophic failures to contaminated lubricant supply from the Cabanatuan depot. A depot inspection was ordered. The inspection found nothing because the contamination had not originated at the depot. The source was never identified in Japanese records. The incident was ultimately classified as a supply chain failure. In the cell's camp, the after-action response was measured in the way that McCarragh measured all outcomes, factually and without theater. He confirmed the operation's result at the full cell briefing, noted its effectiveness against conventional risk assessment, and authorized Dimelantis' immediate promotion to corporal. He made no speech and offered no apology for the dismissal 6 months earlier. He said, addressing the assembled cell directly, that the technique was operationally validated and would be documented for transmission to USAFFE Regional Command. Then he closed the briefing. Villanueva crossed the room afterward and shook Dimelantis' hand. He did not say anything. In the particular economy of men who have been proved wrong about something that mattered, silence accompanied by a handshake carries more weight than any words available. The operational impact extended beyond the immediate disruption. 29 vehicles destroyed or requiring complete engine overhaul represented a significant reduction in the 14th Area Army's available transport in the central Luzon corridor at a critical moment, the week before the late landings. Replacement vehicles were redirected from other staging areas, introducing an estimated 4 to 6 day delay in reinforcement movements. USAFFE Regional Command, receiving the Carraig's field report by radio, transmitted a documented summary of the technique to 3 other resistance cells in Luzon and 1 operating in the Visayas. The scoria suspension method had graduated from one man's observation to institutional knowledge. Aurelio Dimelantis survived the war. He was promoted twice more before the Japanese surrender in August 1945, reaching the rank of technical sergeant, a grade that acknowledged, belatedly and in the formal language of military documentation, the specialized nature of what he had contributed. A USAFE commendation was filed in his name in 1946, a single page citing his role in the October 1944 operation without specifying its technical details, consistent with the classification protocol still governing resistance operations at that time. He returned to Gapon after the war and operated a small engine repair workshop for 30 years. By survivor accounts, he did not readily tell his own story. Those who knew it heard it from Bautista first, or from other former cell members who gathered occasionally in the years after the surrender. Captain McCarragh, interviewed for a Philippine historical research project in 1962, described the October 1944 operation as the single most efficient sabotage action I authorized in 3 years of resistance operations. He named the technique only as a lubricant contamination method. He named the man without hesitation. The lower slopes of Mount Riot still show the volcanic scoria outcrops that Dimelantis collection teams visited across 3 nights in October 1944, eroding, fine-grained, perpetually replenished by weather and time. He knew exactly what he was looking at. No one else in his cell did. His technique was simple, but his legend endures.